Have you ever wanted to be so good at something that you wished you could actually change your body to be specialized for that? Well, Genus Paranthropus did this. They are so good and specialized at chewing. Now let's talk about Genus Paranthropus. They are famous for their gigantic teeth. So let's look back at our tree here. We're talking about these species, a genus Paranthropus known for being megadont or really big teeth. As you can see, they are built to chew. So their molars are really, really big. But even their premolars are molarized. That just means their premolars also look like molars because they just need to chew so much. And then hilariously, their incisors are really, really small. So really, they're just grinding. We see similar types of teeth on elephant and cows, species that are chewing and grinding grass all the time. We also see this just massive mandible, so big. That indicates that it's chewing for long periods of time. It's reinforcing itself because there's just so much force going through this jaw here. This generally indicates that it's doing a lot of chewing at relatively low forces rather than like quick snaps with lots of force at one period of time. Let's compare its mandible here to that of Australopithecus. So you can see it's about the same, the palate is about the same size, but just those back teeth, whew, so big. And then its incisors are also much smaller. More than just the teeth, we see an increase in the muscularity associated with the jaw. So if you put your hand on the side of your head and you move your jaw, you'll feel this muscle right here. So here's your temporalis, and it attaches on the side of your head into your jaw and it helps move that. Our temporalis is really small and just, attaches to the side of our head. But Paranthropus, it had a relatively small brain and a really big temporalis muscle. So it actually has this little mohawk there, a sagittal crest, because that's giving more room for that muscle to attach. It also had this really big masseter muscle here, attaching from the zygomatic bar. So find your cheekbone, and then you're going to have your masseter right here. Oh, that's kind of awkward. But those muscles were really, really big in Paranthropus. Because, if you have big bones, you need to have large muscles to move them. There's a couple different species we're going to talk about here for within genus Paranthropus. We have Paranthropus aethiopicus, Paranthropus boisei, and then lastly Paranthropus robustus. So let's start with Paranthropus aethiopicus. This is the oldest species of the three. We find this one at 2.5 million years ago in Kenya. It's K&M WT 17,000, nicknamed the Black Skull because it's stained black. So this guy, you can see this individual specimen is unfortunately missing his teeth, so we can't draw direct comparisons. But when you look at the root of teeth, they are about the same size as the teeth themselves, and the roots are pretty large, so we can have a pretty good guess that this guy had fairly large teeth. You can also just see how wide this face is, like wide flaring zygomatics or wide cheekbones. And that is another characteristic of Paranthropus. They just have really big faces because they do need to support having such big teeth. Even though we're seeing like really big faces, and this is where we get that robusticity when we're comparing them to Australopithecus, the postcrania was about the same. So really, most of the differences here are in the face and everything relating to chewing, really. And you can see this guy has this nice sagittal crest, has more room to attach his temporalis muscle, and just, a really big face. Slightly later in time, but still again in East Africa, so we find Paranthropus boisei in a couple different places in Tanzania, Kenya, and Ethiopia. Slightly younger, about 2.3 to 1.2 million years ago, this guy is famous for having the biggest teeth of them all. This particular specimen, OH5, is nicknamed Zinj or also Nutcracker Man. He did not literally crack nuts. This is just a nickname because if you think of a nutcracker, they also have very big and strong teeth. People like to argue about what they think Paranthropus was eating. So remember, Nutcracker Man, just a nickname. But let's take a closer look at these teeth. So here we have a modern human, and Paranthropus boisei. Our teeth are so tiny in comparison. Look at those molars. It's like 2 or 3 of our teeth in one. So whatever Paranthropus was eating, they were chewing it a lot. Um, Most people tend to think they were eating grass because that's generally what you need to, what you're using such big teeth before. Though it's really hard to nail down exactly what a fossil species was eating. Some people like to compare these to modern day gelatos because they sit all day eating grass. It's just, a little bit hard to tell, and some of the isotope information is a little bit conflicting. If you're curious, I highly recommend you look it up. Now let's move to South Africa. We have Paranthropus robustus. So again, a little bit younger, 2 to about 1.5 million years ago. This guy is found at Kromdraai and Swartkrans. Relatively similar type of face to that Paranthropus aethiopicus, this really wide flaring cheekbones. Again, this poor guy is missing his teeth. But it's a little bit of that sagittal crest there, really wide zygomatics. So this guy is chewing and chewing a lot. It's interesting that we see the same form or similar forms in both East and South Africa, and that has led people to hypothesize a couple different relationships amongst these 3 species. So here, let's look at this hypothesis. So here we see these species showing up in different lineages. So this is an East African lineage versus a South African lineage. So Aethiopicus and boisei being East African species coming from Australopithecus afarensis, another East African species, and then having Australopithecus robustus coming out of Australopithecus africanus, having our South African lineage. Under this hypothesis, the chewing adaptations would be homoplastic. They would be independently derived in these 2 different lineages. The more common and more popular hypothesis has a monophyly of all of the Paranthropus here. So this monophyly of chewing adaptations or a homology of chewing adaptations, indicating that all of these species are closely related. This is the most common hypothesis right now, but there are still some people who think that there are 2 independent lineages based on geography, and there is, evidence for that as well. If you're interested in this, I highly recommend you dive deep into the Paranthropus literature. But let's summarize our different species here. Again, we have Paranthropus aethiopicus, Paranthropus boisei, and Paranthropus robustus. Aethiopicus is the earliest. Paranthropus boisei has the biggest teeth. Oh, so huge. And then Paranthropus robustus is our one species from South Africa here. Of course, the relationships are a little bit contentious, and sometimes it's helpful to think about all of them at once. So if we're thinking about the entire genus, they are descended from Australopithecus, though in exactly what way, different people have different opinions. They are specialized for heavy chewing, and we are finding them in open grassland environments. So finally, we're transitioning from, a more woodland to a grassland environment. The last thing to note here is they didn't leave any descendants. So these are somewhat of an evolutionary dead end. They are, of course, interesting in their own right, but Paranthropus is doing a different thing than our own ancestors, the members of genus Homo, which we'll be discussing next. So can you explain? What are the species of Paranthropus and what features do they have?